speaking to you from beautiful Philadelphia. How do we become our characters? Like great actors, how can we actually take on their personality and write the dialogue for these characters as if we are that character? Ideally, it would be as if we were possessed by these characters. I want you to write down these three words: mood, disposition, intention. Becoming another personality, the job of actors and also the job of writers when they're writing about the characters in their stories, is not so much about taking on their personalities. It's about getting inside of the place that character occupies. So when we look at the mood of a character, we're not looking at it from the outside. We're not thinking about the way it feels on the outside. We're thinking about the way it feels on the inside. And when we contemplate the mood of a fictional character, we think of it like the weather that follows that character around. And imagine what it feels like. You think it's helpful to think visually about this. Imagine there is some form of weather, and this is their mood, following them around everywhere. And try to feel yourself subjected to that weather, to that mood. There are the more obvious moods, like the person who's being followed around by a rain cloud. So I'm sure you've met someone who's just gloomy, and you can imagine them. It's like they're sitting under this little rain cloud, and it affects their posture, it affects the enthusiasm they have about whatever they're doing. There are more obvious moods, and then a huge amount of less obvious, more distinctive moods. Someone could have an officious mood, and this would be a mood that would make them always act in a very official manner. What are those moods that feel external to that character? If we become that character, we feel it as if it's on the outside of us, affecting our mood. If a person is overjoyed, it's as if they have springs on their shoes, so that when another person takes a step, they take a step. But when this character takes a step, they go a foot further. To a greater and lesser degrees, moods are inescapable. Every person is kind of stuck in their mood, and that is, they see the world through that mood, and it affects everything they can and can't do, and how much they can pay attention to, and the way the world feels to them. They feel the world through that mood. And when you're thinking of it, it's good to think of it intellectually, but it's also great to start thinking of it in three-dimensional terms, where you can visualize. It isn't literally like weather. It isn't. It's only like weather in that it's these external forces that are pushing in on the character. An individual doesn't just decide to be optimistic or decide to be gloomy. They're accumulative, they're residual. So moods are things that over time build up, and in our characters, if we're really feeling that build up, then it's obvious to us to describe in our fiction what they would say, how they would react, and what they would do in fictional situations. Remember, moods are not just flavor. They aren't just decoration on fiction. They are part of the powers that interact in a fictional story. So if you have a character that needs to save the day but has a mood that stops them from saving the day, that's a huge part of the story. You have someone who needs to go and save their child, but they're so terrified of the gunfire that they just, will they be able to make themselves do it or not? Is their mood holding them back? Is the weather of that fear so strong that it would be as strong as literally putting iron walls up around them? The next point for learning to channel your character's disposition, a character's disposition. Think of disposition as the personality, not personality just about, what a person is like, but personality factors in terms of what it enables and disables them. If a person has a great sensory disposition, they're able to take in a lot of different information, then they are able to make better decisions in that fictional scenario. Or you might have a character who their disposition is that they're only able to focus on one thing at a time. You might imagine someone who they can only do one thing, and if other things are going on, their disposition won't allow them to pay attention to it. You might have a character who has no patience at all, and so their disposition is that if they're in a situation where they need to react rapidly, they operate excellently. But if they're in a situation where they're waiting in the bushes for the target to come along, after an hour they've got to get up and move around. So a disposition, these are not just character traits, they are personality, abilities, and disabilities. The reason I emphasize that they are abilities and disabilities is, again, a major point here is that personality is not just window decoration. It plays a part in the plot, in the way the story goes. It is as big a factor in what happens in the story as whether or not the character has a gun when he or she needs one, whether or not they have a car when they need one. If you have a character who has an irritable disposition and they're in a scenario where they need to charm people, they just won't be able to do it. That's where they fall short. And it's in reality, everyone has different disposition, and everyone finds themselves in situations where they operate better than anyone else could, and in situations where they don't operate as well. And everyone faces that because we just all have these incredibly diverse dispositions, and some people are great at handling minute detail, and others are great at responding real rapidly and really good at change, and other people are great at doing the exact same thing faithfully for a lifetime. So when you imagine a disposition of your character, this is where you use pretend as a creative tool. It's the 3D visual thinking rather than intellectual thinking. You imagine yourself surrounded by these certain abilities and disabilities, and you try to feel yourself inside that bubble and try to know what it would feel like to have those different abilities and disabilities of personality. It isn't like a person could decide to be more patient. Yes, anyone could try to be more patient, but depending on where your character is at, they're stuck with kind of the extent of patience that they might have, or the extent of rapid decision-making ability that they might have. You can only use what each character can only use what they get. They can only work with the cards they've been dealt. Third one on the list, my favorite, intention. One of the biggest truths about the human condition is every human is always in a state of intending. Throughout our entire lives, it is such a huge part of our lives that, like fish in water, like fish that aren't aware that they're in water because that is all they know, we don't even realize how we are constant creatures of intending. If you want to be like the great actors and become your characters, a key way is to gain a greater understanding of all the intentions they have. Humans are in a constant state of wanting. So throughout our lives, it's an active state, even in the passive states. If a person is resting, they are wanting rest. They are wanting to take a break to get relief. I mean, one thing that really shows this condition is boredom. What happens when we more or less get everything we want and need in that moment? We become bored. We want for want. We want to have something to intend for, to go after. As an example, I have one character who, one of the many things he wants is to always have people agree with him and think he's profound. And another character, she wants to always know that she's doing the right thing. So when I'm writing, I go back and forth becoming each character. And in their dialogue, I can feel those intentions played out to where whenever he says something, he's quick to it almost becomes an argument because he's ready to defend it and make sure he convinces everyone before it even becomes one. That's just part of the way he acts, is I could feel what those intentions would feel like, the way it would shape the way he sees the fictional situation. And with her, everything she says, you know, half the time there's a question mark because she's wanting to make sure that it's fitting for the situation. And I try as much as possible not to look at these characters from the outside, but to go into, they each have a world of intention that they see the world from, and it shapes the way they see every situation. For some people, you know, to generalize, every situation is a party, and for other people, every situation is their ears where a character can voice their complaints about life. Whenever there's discussion about the wants that people have, again, there are the very obvious ones. There are people that want power, fame, all of that different stuff, but there are a lot of the best way to get to know a character is to get an understanding of all the interesting, less obvious, more diverse intentions that people have. You know, some people, their intention is to they really go after their synapses firing from having interesting conversations. That is their intention. Other people have discovered the pleasure of giving. There are people who their intention is to prove other people wrong. There's innumerable. There is such a world out there to explore that if you go out there and become someone who studies the intentions of people, you're going to find tons of original material. You're going to be able to write characters, the kinds of characters that have never been written before, that'll be a surprise to anyone who reads your writing. And it's one of those doorways to great discovery. I like to think of it as a person having a body of intention. So they have their physical body, and then they have the organism of all their different overall intentions all working together. Sometimes some of their intentions are working against other of their intentions, and using that three-dimensional virtual reality imagination way of thinking of it to visualize it as this body of intention. Which is the truer self, the one we see, or the body of intention driving that person? Instead of having to intellectualize and strategize the things our characters will say and do, if we have a strong understanding of the body of intention of each character, then we can get inside of those characters and we can start acting and doing the kinds of things they would do. Pay special attention to the more permanent, subtle intentions driving your characters, especially like childhood hang-ups and intentions that have developed over time that sometimes the character would find impossible to let go of, especially if they have an intention that they find impossible to let go of. You know you're reading fiction from someone who an advanced writer, someone who has a lot of practice writing fiction, when all their characters cannot just do whatever they feel like doing in any situation. Characters have limitations, and that has real consequences in a good story. If this video was helpful for you and you want to get me back, please hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment, tell a friend, and you can be a super viewer of my videos by sharing through Twitter, Google+, the different ways of sharing YouTube videos. I would greatly appreciate that. And the reason I keep making these videos is because of the great feedback I get. I appreciate the feedback so much. It's a huge encouragement to me. It drives my intention to make more videos. Please take the time to go see the fiction I'm working on, illustrated, put in video form, at solomation.com. It's a bizarre alternate reality story, Terrible Immunity. If you have any comment, anything that you think other viewers might want to read about this subject, please leave a comment. I hope your writing goes great. I hope that you become your characters, that you enjoy developing, channeling abilities, and I hope your writing goes well, and have a good day.